And we're live.
And we're live. And I can see people flooding in. Brilliant. Hello, everybody who's joining us, all the early joiners. Welcome to our first Meet the Manager event of 2021, starring our new head coach, Mark Robinson, and our performance mindset coach, Steve Sallis, who are with us, with Ivor Heller presenting. He'll be asking your questions that you sent over in advance, as well as some questions you send over the next hour or so. First of all, just like to thank a few people for getting this together. Hannah and George and Gary behind the scenes, who you won't see, have helped us with the technology and the invites and all that kind of stuff. Thank you to everyone who registered. We've got around, I think, about 300 people registered, and that was about an hour ago, so maybe even a few more last minute. Just a couple of house rules before we start. If you would refrain from swearing as we go, and that goes to the panelists as well as our guests will be able to chat. If you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a chat box. So if you want to speak to each other, that's where to go. Click on that. You'll be able to post things in your name, as I say, no swears, please, in your questions and so forth, or in your chat. There's more pertinently a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask questions to Steve and Mark or Ivor, please, that's where you should go. As I said, please keep them clean. We will answer as many as possible. We're looking to go for about an hour. As I said, thank you to everyone who sent questions over in advance. We've had quite a few, so we're going to get through as many as possible over the next hour. And just while I'm waffling, while people are coming in, I see we've got about 150 people in. Let's have a little poll just for fun, as it's a Meet the Manager event. Let's keep it managerial themed. We're asking you tonight, who's the greatest Wimbledon manager of all time? Right, you should see a poll on your screen. Just click your choice. It's Neil Ardley, Terry Brown, Dave Anderson, Joe Kinnear, Bobby Gould, Dave Bassett, Alan Batsford, or Les Henley are your options. If you just click one and submit, just for fun, and we'll give you the results of that in a moment. I'm just going to do that myself. It worked. I'm allowed to do it. Great. Right, we've got 163 people in, so I'll waffle for another minute or so while you make your decision on the poll. For the people who've just arrived, please see the bottom of your screen. There is a chat box. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves about the greatest Wimbledon manager. Of course, Mark's not yet on there, but when we do this Meet the Manager 2022, I have high hopes. And if you do want to ask Mark or Steve questions, there's a Q&A icon down the bottom. Pop your question in there. We'll be going through them over the course of the next hour. I should also mention that after our Meet the Manager session, if you go over to YouTube and search for, I've written this down, 9YRS podcast, search for that. That's 9 Years Podcast, but YRS. They will be doing a Sunday night live special and talking about everything we've talked about. So that's your Sunday night right there, I reckon. Okay, so we've got first almost 200 people in, so I think that's enough of me waffling. Can we see the poll results? I can't, but hopefully you can. And right, oh, there we go. There's the results. So the greatest ever Wimbledon manager thus far, Dave Bassett. Well deserved. My era. So I know I don't look old enough, but it was. So, right, without further ado, I think that's a good number of people in. Let's get started with your advanced questions. Thank you very much. And over to you, Ivor.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's well and safe at this time. Certainly, I'd like to start off just by saying well done to Robbo and the team for yesterday's point up at Blackpool. It was very well received by the people at Blackpool. They thought we did really well, and it was a good trip, and the team and everything have come out of it fitting well. And yeah, really well done, Robbo and team. Fantastic stuff. So the first question. And now this is I know we have to be really careful with the way we do everything at Wimbledon because everyone's always watching. But this one has been slipped in. It's favouritism because it's from Graham Stacey, the man who just introduced everybody. So he slipped this one in for himself. So the Dubai Don. We've been lining up in a 4-2-3-1 formation. is that your preferred setup, or is that something you've introduced based on the players we have?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a case of looking at the players we had, Ivor. And obviously, you know, we were 12 games without a win, and it was looking at the players we had. We had very little attacking options at the time because Ollie was unfit, so we only really had Ryan and Joe. So it was more looking at that. And Ryan, to be honest, has always been a wide player. You know, what Ryan had said that to me. I think he only played up front once, and that happened to be against us in the friendly v Brighton. But he's actually a wide player. So it was more about trying to get some security at the back and where we could get attacking threat. And I just thought that we could do that through more rotation. I didn't personally think three at the back suited us, because I think if you're going to play three at the back, then your left and right centre backs have to be very, very mobile. And I think, you know, a 3-5-2 should be a very attacking formation with your wing backs that are more type wingers that can defend. So it was definitely more looking at the players. It's not a favoured formation of mine. It was just more looking at the players, how we can have some security and how we can build from a base, really. So that was how I saw it. I mean, obviously now with Ollie coming back, you know, I may look at that again. You know, moving forward, formation, you know, I'm a big believer in shape behind the ball and how you attack. So what we've been talking to the players about is defending in the 5 and attacking in the 5. And obviously it's different at the moment because we're in a relegation battle, but moving forward, I'm a big believer in you have good shape behind the ball, and then you have a lot of rotation moving forward. You know, we're not quite at that stage yet because we're limited on training days. So it was more just about getting a formation that I thought the players could perform in and that we could be effective in.
Okay, well, I think that's a really good answer. Thank you for that one, Robbo. We're going to move straight on to the next question, because we can bring Steve in on this one, I'm absolutely sure. So just feel free to jump in whenever you want, Steve, unless you've got anything you want to say about formation, the psychology of formation. I don't know. Right, anyway, let's move on. Right, so this is from Gavin Doig, and it's 2 questions. So the first one is it possible to protect players from reading negative or harmful posts on social media and the potential mental strain that can take? And that is definitely one for Steve, I would suggest.
Yeah, you've killed me with that question. Firstly, let me just say thank you to all the fans and people that have come on the call today. I'm very grateful, and I feel very much part of the family already. So I'll start with that. I think social media has its positives and negatives. I think we all know that. I don't think it's really my position to tell players whether to do social media or not. I think we need to try and use social media in a positive sense. I think we all know about the internet trolls that are out there and what we call the keyboard warriors. But I think bad press and good press have been around for as long as we've all been alive. And I think it's, the danger of now is this sort of this Instagram fame type thing, where I suppose my biggest bugbear with social media is just the negative connotations that it can have and how that can influence people in a negative way. So in terms of that, without stating the obvious, I mean, most of the high performance people that I'm around, they just ignore anything negative, or just make sure they try and block it out and block out the noise. So yeah, probably the easiest way to describe. I mean, it's all personal, it's all individual, and that's not always a correct answer for everyone using media in their own way either.
Okay, so Robbo, you got anything to say about that? Are you happy with the players on social media and so on?
Well, yeah, I mean, Steve, that's part of the reason why I brought Steve in, is for things like that. From my side of it, I just think if we create our own environment where players feel really comfortable, a real family environment, that's where they get a lot of their security from. And, you know, through the education that we give the players on a day-to-day basis, they kind of over time start to realise that the nonsense that they'd read on social media means nothing. So I think if we have an open and honest environment where the players feel really comfortable, where it's not full of egos, then you tend to find, you know, the players will come to me, they come to Steve, they talk about things, and those kind of things, those negative comments almost become, they start to realise that it means nothing. So I think our own personal environment is really, really important, because, you know, if you've got players coming to work on a daily basis and they can't open up and they can't talk, and then they're getting those sort of negative comments, then I think it's a problem. I think if they come into work and they feel comfortable and relaxed and they feel they can talk, then that sort of stuff just disappears, really.
Okay, so thank you for that. The second part of Gavin's question is it currently possible to attract the biggest London clubs to loan players to us and build long-term positive relationships with them, or do we need to grow further before this can happen? So that's definitely one for you, Robbo.
No, definitely, 100%. You know, I have to be honest, I think it's strange it hasn't happened already. There is absolutely no reason, and that's part of what I want to build. I think if you're going to get the best possible loans from the clubs that produce the best, then that fits in with the style of football, and I've talked about that before. I think there are reasons why we haven't been able to get those loans. I'm being honest with you. You know, if you want to take, you know, someone's best technical midfielder and you're playing a certain style of football, I'll be honest, that's not going to happen, and I know that's the case. So no, I've already, you know, part of my presentation, as you well know, was I've already contacted clubs about loans, and they said if I get the job that they'd love to work with us. And you know, so over the next few weeks I'm going to be getting presentations ready to present to those clubs, because that's what you have to do. You know, these clubs spend absolutely millions and millions of pounds developing these young men, and they want to know what you're, you know, obviously we want to know, you know, we want whatever we want from those players, but they also know what we're going to give to them, what we're going to do to them, because, you know, fundamentally you're polishing their products. So it's absolutely right that we should have to do a presentation, and that's what we're doing. By the same token, with our own loans program, you know, that's what eventually I'll be expecting to happen with, you know, the semi-professional clubs at step 1 and step 2 and step 3. I would expect them to come and present to us as well, you know, in terms of how our players are going to be developed as well as what our players give to them. So that's not something we need to grow into. It's something that will be happening very, very soon.
Okay, so okay, thanks for that, Robbo. Steve, you got anything to add to that? I don't suppose so, really, but you never know. Anything to add?
Only the fact that Robbo and I will discuss that in the summer, no doubt about. You know, we're all adding to the process. I think just connections in non-league are going to be vital for the club moving forwards. Really, I'm sure Robbo will agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. The next one is from Dan Curran. Again, I think this is more for you, Robbo, because you work with him a lot. It's are you disappointed that Anthony Hartigan was sent out on loan just days before you took over? And would you have preferred to have had him in your first team squad as one of your youth success stories?
Yeah, I mean, it's got nothing to do with me and being a success story. Just as a quality player, I'm obviously not I'm disappointed not to have him available. I'm probably more disappointed that, you know, his development hasn't taken him where he should be currently right now. You know, I think, you know, if you go back to when Anthony came into our first team, we saw what a talent he was. That wasn't a fluke, what everyone saw. So, you know, I'm more interested in why he hasn't flourished in the way that he's flourished. That's the bigger issue to me, because, you know, when we do produce these players, we've got to get absolutely the maximum out of them. So again, it goes back to environments and learning environments and players not being fearful and getting the most out of our own product. So it's not about me, but 100% it would have been great to have him here, and you know, people seeing what I know Anthony is actually capable of. So, you know, we'll see where that one goes.
Okay, and a second one also from Dan Curran. He's got 3 in here. Well done, Dan. We've had great success developing young goalkeepers who've then gone on to other clubs but never really played for us. Which of Nick Tzanev and Matt Cox has the better chance of breaking into the first team, and when? There we are.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say who's got. I think it's all about creating the right pathway. And again, I think it is really disappointing that we haven't had those goalkeepers break into our own first team. And I believe, you know, that's, people have said, oh, that they wouldn't have stayed because you've got Will Mannion in there as well. And I think it's all about pathways. I think it's creating a pathway for these young men. And I honestly believe if there was a pathway created and that pathway sold to them, that those players would have gone on to play for our first team, rather than possibly just look, you know, making, you know, I'm being perfectly honest, taking some short-term money I think they could, we would be sitting here now with our own goalkeeper, which is what we should have. So, in terms of, I don't really want to talk about Nick and Matt, if you look at Tans, we've got his development wrong fundamentally. He's 23 now and he's had one loan. And this is the sort of stuff that's got to change and what we've got to look at. I think he joined us when he was 19, 20. He should have been out on loan straight away. And I think if we'd done that, again, Nick would be a lot further down his pathway to being our first team goalkeeper. So it's massively important we get that right with Coxey. We've got to get him some good quality loans and make sure that he sees the pathway at this football club so that we don't lose him. And if he does end up going, he goes at the right time and he goes for the right amount of money.
Sounds good, like that. Okay. It's question 3, and I think I'm gonna because this is more about you, Robbo, but we'll see if we can get Steve maybe to comment on this straight away. I love how honest and open you are as a manager and head coach. You have talked about a mindset problem in the team that you're trying to resolve. What is the problem and how are you approaching it? So, I'd like to bring Steve in here to see if he can answer it for you almost, because it's the mindset part. I think that's your job, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, but I'm also a master deflector, Ivor, so I'm going to pass it back to Robbo first. Yeah, and
I like that. Think what to say. I like that. Consider it deflected. Go on, Robbo.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's no short answer to it, Ivor, because it's not one thing. One of my own personal beliefs is that we've used our strengths and perceived them as weaknesses in the past. So things that are our strengths, in my opinion, of being fan owned, and we've used that as a limit, as though it's a limit to what we can do. And I think the fact that we're fan owned is a huge strength, and it's being fan owned has led us to talk about budgets, and I don't think that's healthy. So the fact that we're fan owned for me needs to be a huge strength. Of course, in terms of we know we haven't got a lot of money, but what we're going to do, we're just going to carry on talking about it, or we're going to use these things as a massive strength. So I think that's fed down to the players in the past, and I think that changes people's mindsets, because if you start talking about budgets and then people's expectations lower, players' expectations lower. So in terms of mindsets, that's what we've got to change. So it's not a quick fix. It's how we come to work, how we talk, how we live our lives every day, how we stimulate the players. And, I've just found it bizarre over the years, based on where we've come from, and that we've found it, we talk about budgets far too much. It's not going to change. It is what it is. We've got to think outside the box. We've got to get every marginal game we can. But, we are a fan-owned club and we've got the greatest story in football. And I'm not saying that for effect. We have to use that to our benefit. At the end of the day, all we need to get is 30, 40 like-minded people in the building who all think the same way and all believe that we can massively punch above our weight. And once you do that, anything's possible. So in terms of changing mindsets, it's not a quick fix. It's a daily thing. It's the way we behave every single day, the messages, how people portray themselves, so it's just a continuous ongoing thing, and making sure we get the right people in the building.
Got it. Okay. Right, come on in, Steve. Let's see this, because the mindset bit. I'm interested in how you would go about this, working with the players and with Robbo to get the mindset right.
Well, I think we need to mention the fantastic team behind the team to start with, because it's a whole sort of multifaceted approach to development. I think mindset's a very ambiguous word, but if we break it down into attitude to learning, resilience, grit, determination, all of these buzzwords that are so vital in elite performance. And I think, again, mindset is an individual process. I think it's a collective process. And me and Robbo speak every day about culture and what culture looks and how it actually feels for players, Monday to Friday, but also on a match day. So I think that mindset of players, what's my role been in the last month is probably just been bundles and bundles of really relaxed, sensible conversations, either just around how the players feel, what we need to do to grow. But that, again, when I say we, not me, I mean it unbelievably sincerely. There's so many people on the cultural bus that we need to make sure we, you know, as Robbo says, hitting marginal gains, that we just need to stay transparent with each other. We need to stay open, and we just need to make sure that we add value in every facet of the process to make sure that mindsets on a match day are confident, but at the same time free from worry, fear and anxiety.
Good, nice, like that answer, thank you.
Just to add to that, sorry, I've just to add to that, you know, just to try and give the fans an insight. So we've been talking to the players, and you know, this goes back from the academy and something that we wanted to produce at the academy. And our biggest thing at the academy was, you know, off the pitch, we wanted to behave in certain ways that people were happy to meet us. And I think you saw that at the hotel yesterday. You witnessed yourself, sorry, on Friday, you know, the players, the way they're behaving around the staff at the hotel. So it's almost like off the pitch, people can't wait to meet us, but on the pitch, we're the last people you ever want to come up against. And that was something with the academy. You know, when you're a kid and you wake up and you can't wait to play football, our dream was as an academy is that the opposition woke up, thought, oh, I've got a game today. Then they remembered it was Wimbledon and they wanted to get back under the sheets. And that's kind of that's the mindset we want to achieve. You know, good people who you know, do the right thing off the pitch, you know, but when it comes to on the pitch, that we're feared. And as I said, that these take time, but that's where we want to head.
Okay. Basically, Lee Finch asked the similar question about changing the mindset of modern footballers. So we're going to, you know, no disrespect there, Lee. We've got lots of questions. We're going to keep moving on here. This is from Darren Stokes. Okay, it's also quite similar, really. Clearly, mindset and behaviours are as important to you as footballing ability. What can you do to make sure that players you bring in have the right mindset? Do you see yourself, in effect, interviewing players before you sign them? Good one for both of you there, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, you know, character profiling is going to be so important. As I said, if you look at where our players are going to come from, you know, our academy is going to be more accountable than ever to produce the players that we need. And Mike and all the team absolutely know that, because if we can't produce the right characters from our academy, then obviously we're in trouble. But so they'll be more accountable than ever. That's one way our players are going to come in. Obviously, loanees, we want to get the best possible loans we can. And again, we're going to need character profiling that. But if you're going to the best clubs, that shouldn't be obviously an issue. And then you're looking at taking players from outside. And I think in the past, if you've got players coming through into the building of a certain age, I think you've got to remember, at a club like ours, they're coming into your building for a reason. And if you don't do the character profiling, you can get it massively wrong. So, you know, if we're taking players in from non-league, you know, it's about what they're going to bring to us. So certainly in terms of interviewing players, we want to delve deep into their character and have processes to find out what they're about. Because as I said, you know, fundamentally, there's all these players out there playing football. We're only looking at getting 20 to 30 of the right people in the building. So certainly getting the character profiling right is hugely important.
Steve, will you be involved in that process, you know, coming in and looking at a player and seeing, you know, thinking about what they're saying to you and their background and so on?
Well, I've drove the manager mad that want to be part of that process. Yes, it'll be up to him whether he decides I do it or not. We have lots of conversations about culture, and culture is a key component to all of us growing. I think on an individual level, you know, it's also important to mention we've got some great people in the building at the moment as well. You know, in terms of, you know, human capability and the types of players that we've got, and I say this quite relaxed. I think football's had a bad press for many years for obviously having this connotation of having bad people, and since I've joined the club, I can't be anything but excited about the types of characters we have, and actually I think the controllables are either it's quite easy to be a very good human being, be selfless, be kind, be caring, and run around for your teammates. So I think from that point of view, let's be quite pragmatic about that. That the players have got a decision to make about whether they want to do this for themselves in order to better themselves and grow, and you know, make sure they fulfil their own personal challenges in their careers. So yeah, in summary, I think that mindset of elite footballers is a lot easier than we realise. Firstly, be a good human being, and then have an attitude to get better every day.
Right. Okay.
I'll just back that up, Ive. I mean, the players, they've been fantastic. And I said, Pete, I agree with Steve. Most people are really good people, and they react to the environment you put them in. And the staff and everyone have tried to. We've tried to change that. That's been a big thing, as well as the football side of things, is culturally changing it. And the players are buying into it, and I think they're loving coming into work, because fundamentally, everyone wants to get better, but it's just having that environment that brings that out of everyone.
I think that something that I don't think I haven't seen a question further on, but we have got quite a habit of bringing in some players in the past that we knew were talented players, but probably needed a little bit more, not just an arm putting around them, but reshaping their careers. I can think of several that fit into that kind of category. Will you be up for looking at players like that? Maybe they're a bit bent out of shape, and then you bring them back in. Yeah,
I mean, again, that goes back to are they learners? Do they want to get better? If they everyone's willing to change, but are they willing to change? 100%. Of course, you'd look at anyone like that. And again, I think sometimes it happens, because you get, a lot of talked about processes and not being bogged down with the 3 points on a Saturday. And this is why the processes are so important, because if you're too up and down with the 3 points on a Saturday, all this stuff we're talking about becomes irrelevant. So, if you look after the whole game, which for me was our most disappointing performance since I've had the job, there was no shouting and hollowing. There was just about reflection on the processes we put in place in terms of our identity. So, there was no calling people out and saying you're this and you're that, you've let us down, because football's such an emotional game that we talk about players wanting to open up and players playing without shackles, and then 1 minute you're saying things that you probably don't mean. So it's really important to be process driven. And that's not taking emotion out of football. It's emotional enough as it is, but it's so important to be process driven and not knee jerk, because then, you can turn players around. I think it's the knee jerk of the 3 points on the Saturday where it all gets lost. So all we did after Hull, for example, was looked at how we'd gone, looked at the progress we'd made, and sort of realised that how far away in that game we'd gone away from our identity. And, I'd like to think that you saw in the Shrewsbury game, although we didn't play particularly well, there was more identity, there was more grit. And then I think that led on to Saturday's performance, where you saw a bit of that and you saw the football as well. And, and that doesn't mean that the following week's going to be perfect, but if you're knee jerk and reactionary and don't go back to the processes of what you're building, then all this other stuff we're talking about just goes out the window, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to a question from Peter Godfrey. Finances aside, out of all the players released at the end of last season, are there any that, if you're in charge then, you would not have let go? And are there any that you might look to re-sign going forward? That's probably quite difficult on the re-sign going forward. But of the ones that got released, are there any that you really liked?
To be honest, I got on with them all as people. In terms of, I don't think it's very healthy to look back in the past. Really, I got on well with them all as people. I didn't possibly know them deep enough to answer that question. That's not me being deflective. I probably didn't know them deep enough to know whether they're players that I would have kept on and been part of the process. But in terms of the dealings I had with them, I got on really well with them. There's certainly younger players that I would have liked to have still seen been at the football club, and that's the processes that need to change when we come to our decision making on players, and planning ahead, and again not having knee-jerk reactions, because there's certainly 2 or 3 younger players that I don't feel ever got the opportunity to show what they're about, but again, I'm not sure it's too healthy to go back and revisit things. You have to move on and make sure it doesn't happen again.
All right, well, just in fantasy land then, is there one player that if you could sign them back, one player, any one player that you could sign back, who would it be?
Sarzi.
Okay, fair enough. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just in case there's any other ex-players listening to it, only because, you know, people talk about talent. And for me, talent is having the ability to come in and be the best you can possibly be every single day. Because if you've got that sort of talent in the building, you can't really go wrong. And that's what that lad had. And that's the reason why, you know, he's playing championship football now. So, yeah, it'd have to be him. Okay,
that's great. That's great. So, okay, next question is from Mark Jones. Evening, Jonesy. You're a coach who believes all players can improve. How does that play out with senior players, especially ones that you have not recruited? Your previous experience with academy players and scholars obviously includes players being released, but I'm curious how we will approach transfer windows, in particular, the outgoing movements. When do you believe we need to have the new player recruitment set up in place? There's kind of a couple of questions in the one there. So
that's a long, yeah. So the first bit was about players improving, yeah? And
yeah, no, it was your coach, you know, who believes all players can improve. How does that play out with senior players, especially ones you have not recruited? So answer that bit first then.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you've got people in the building who don't think they can improve, you don't want them in the building. And that includes myself, that includes staff. We can all improve. You never stop learning. And that's been the biggest breath of fresh air is the more senior players, how they've bought into everything. Because, you know, if there was anything I was a little bit nervous about when I took the job, you're going to be how are the more senior players going to react? But I'd kind of got to know them enough during my spell in and around the first team to believe that methods that I know and that we've used as staff, they would react to, and they've been absolutely brilliant. You know, that they're reading books, they're coming to me with stuff, that they're clipping their own clips, that just generally as people, that everyone wants to get better on. It's just how you unlock it. I honestly don't believe there is anyone who doesn't want to get better. It's just how you unlock it, and that's the skill of a coach and the skill of our staff. That's what we've got to do. Obviously, you know, if someone takes up too much of your time, they're not worth working on. But again, if you have an environment where you all come in to get better and people don't feel like they can't talk and can't find a voice. So one of Steve's biggest things is, you know, we're all different, and having an acceptance of each other in this mad ego-driven thing that football is, that you're all acceptable of each other. And then once you realise that, you know, you get this flourishing environment over time. So yeah. So the current players, the older players, have been a breath of fresh air, and you know, they've gave me the belief that things that I've always thought you could do, you absolutely can. And I forgot the next bit of the question.
That's why I broke it down into a few bits here. So your previous experience with academy players and scholars obviously includes players being released, but I'm curious how we will approach transfer windows, in particular the outgoing movements.
Right. Okay. Well, exactly. So you've got to be planning ahead. So you can't be letting anyone go out the building. You know, so you've got to have future planning. So if you've got, you know, maybe a 19-year-old first-year pro, and you're looking, you've got to be looking ahead and seeing where do they fit, and not letting someone go because they're not ready to be in your first team right now. And this is just something that has always bemused me with football, that we think 18, 19-year-olds are going to have a massive effect on your first team. Yes, some will. But if, you know, where we are as a club, if we're genuinely going to have a conveyor belt of young talent coming through, we've got to realise that it happens at different times. You know, so we all love Rudy, you know, but he's going to have his up and downs. He's a young man learning the game. And he's happened to go in there at 18 and 19, have an effect. Anthony went in at 18 and had an effect. But, you know, not all of them are going to be like that. You know, we've got players who are going to need a little bit longer. Let's say, for example, it's very difficult for an 18, 19-year-old centre-back to go and have an impact. But it doesn't mean they're not going to be good enough to have a career and have an impact. So, you know, we've got to get our own loans program right, and we've got to make sure that we're not blocking pathways for these players. You know, we've got to keep growing as a club. So it's about planning, really. It's about looking ahead and making sure we're utilising our own players best. making sure we're utilising the loan market the best, because that can be a way that you don't end up blocking the pathway of your own talent, if that makes sense. You know, if you can bring in a 21-year-old on loan in a position knowing that you've got maybe a 19-20-year-old who will be ready next year, that means you're not blocking pathways. So it's future planning that's absolutely key.
Okay. And then the last part of this was the actual question. When do you believe we need to have the new player recruitment set up in place?
As soon as possible, obviously, you know, as soon as possible. So, you know, I had a long meeting with Joe, and we're looking at it very differently. And that includes obviously how we go about loans and the presentations and coming up with data in terms of our signings. So, you know, we need to get that in place as soon as possible. And that process has already started, yeah.
Okay. So there we are. That's that. That's answered that one. Now we've got one from Ray Armfield. As Mark has worked with our homegrown players while in the academy, is there now a danger of selection favouritism ahead of players brought in from other clubs by previous managers?
Well, if I was stupid, yes, but I don't consider myself stupid. So maybe Ray's coming from a little angle there. I'm trying to think what angle he's coming from. So he can't be talking about Rudy, because obviously he's done well. He can't be
talking about individual players. He's just
well. I don't know. I don't. You know, why would I do that? I'm going to play players who deserve to be in the side. So, you know, I'm just thinking, what, I wouldn't have any favouritism to anyone. That's not my job. My job is to play who I think are the best players. So, yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what that question means, or what, you know, because that's sort of judging me that I don't know what I'm doing. So I do know what I'm doing, and I select players based on their talent. And again, their talent isn't always their ability. They're two different things. Their talent is in terms of, do they want to get better? Do they genuinely want to play for this football club? And do I think they've got the learning ability to improve? So yeah, there won't be any favouritism.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Lee Willett, and we're going to go into the live questions. We've got a few here that were extra ones sent in earlier, so I'm just going to go through a few of these. We'll try and step on the gas just a little bit. This one is from Lee Willett. A goalkeeper seems such a critical position for the team as a whole. We've had a long line of loan keepers since Jamie Shea, and the impact has been mixed. That's to his mind. We've also lost two of our academy goalkeepers to higher league clubs before they've played for the first team, and those keepers have gone on to do quite well. Joe Bursick at Stoke, for instance. What is your strategy for filling the goalkeeper position going forward, and where do you see our developing keepers, Matt Cox in this, for instance, fitting into that?
No, actually, well, it goes back to the same question, and making sure that we don't lose Matt Cox, and making sure that he can see there's a clear pathway for him, and when he's ready, that you know, because it's, you know, Bezo's been dying to have his own keeper, and that's no disrespect to the other keepers. Obviously, you want your own goalkeeper, because, sorry, who asked the question again? Who was it?
Lee Willett.
Lee, because as Lee points out, you know, it's such a massive position, and when we've got the loans right, you've seen that. But to have your own goalkeeper is absolutely massive. So, you know, again, it's just about planning and not looking to the immediate and going for a, you know, to earn a few pounds quickly and let a player go, having a proper development plan for that player so that they get into our first team. And, you know, as I said, fundamentally, if they do end up going, they will. But we certainly want to have 2-3 years out of them, and then we sell them for amount of money that actually means something, and, you know, not for a couple of £100,000, which it fundamentally doesn't mean a lot to us. So again, it's just about future planning. And I think people say, oh no, you'll lose them players as soon as big clubs come in, they want to go, and it's absolute nonsense. You know, we've had young players at this football club when we used to play Sunday League football, who stayed at this club and could have gone to Chelsea, Brentford, Fulham, and that, you know, they used to pay subscription fees to pay for this football club. And again, this goes back to values and cultures. That's why this is so important, because if you have this, I don't believe players will go. You know, Joe Bursick, for example, was on loan for Accrington Stanley. You know, he could have been ours. He could have been playing for us. So these are key things that we got to get right, definitely.
Okay. I think I'm going to read out one more question now, and then we're going to go on to the live questions. So there's a few that haven't quite made it, I'm afraid. Oh no, we've already had that one anyway from Johnny Wawa. I've just got to give him a shout out. The Womble Bot, what a guy. We kind of asked that question already, mate. So one more here. Right, Andrew Burton, is the formation system he's currently playing at the moment the way he would normally want us to play, or is it a result of the players that are coming? We've kind of had that, but so is this the system that you want to continue to use, Robert? That's from Andrew Burton. I've cut that short a little bit. Sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I think it was a system that suited the players we had currently, and I thought, you know, the players would feel comfortable in. It would allow them to perform, play with a bit more rotation and freedom, and obviously, most importantly, get us results. But no, it's not. It's, as I said, it's not a favoured formation. We changed to a diamond on Saturday towards the end of the game. Unfortunately, that, you know, the one slightly negative at the moment is we haven't got loads of time on the training pitch with the Saturday, Tuesday program. I mean, I actually think flexibility in formation moving forward is going to be something that we're actually going to need. You know, if you look at us again, where we are as a club and where our gains are going to come from, I actually think having that flexibility to change formation, and that doesn't mean tinkering. I'm talking about having 3 or 4 formations that players feel comfortable in. So you have that kind of, you know, you might be playing well and teams look at you in a certain formation, and you can have that flexibility to flip and do something a little bit different. I think we're going to need that moving forward. So, no, I'm as I said, I'm a big believer in shape. I think, you know, formations are gradually going to disappear out of football in some respects. You know, players are going to play with a lot more freedom and a lot more flexibility. So I'm a big believer in shape behind the ball, and I'm a big believer in giving players freedom to express themselves and rotate. But again, as I said, that takes time. We're very limited on time on the training pitch. So as it sits now, that the 4-2-3-1 was just something I thought that could get us back on track in terms of results, and suited the current personnel that we got.
Okay, right. Well, look, I'm sorry to the ones that I haven't been able to get in there, but yeah, they've some of them are repeating so on. So, Hannah, can you hear me, Hannah?
Yes. Sorry for popping up earlier than I should have done, but we've got loads of questions coming in on the live. Loads of really good ones as well, including from Michael Hamilton, who we had during the Meet the Academy very recently, and it was an excellent session. And he wants to hear from Steve a bit, and he wants to hear a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now.
Well, our very own Michael's asked that, has he? Okay, yeah. That's very kind.
He's got another question as well.
Yeah, well, I call myself a failed footballer on Twitter, everyone. So that's the first thing. Is I was at Brighton for 8 years, got released, and was the only footballer of my generation to have any A-levels. So I went to university at Greenwich from Brighton and was an inner city PE teacher for 17 years and a vice principal for 9. So the reason I drive all my friends and my cohort mad and Robbo mad about cultures, because me and Robbo are probably so aligned on that more than anything else, around behaviours, around attitude to learning, around good people, around the ability to really want to win, all of those those edge orientated characteristics we need to be successful. So yeah, that was really my journey. I've obviously lectured around the country and several places, and then I actually had an opportunity to go work in pro football at Millwall. So I had 4.5 amazing seasons there, loved every minute of it. And then that led to working for the national under-15s and various things. So when Robbo called me about supporting him, and he's going to get a big head now, the bloke is a complete people carrier, right? And it's important that the fans know this, is that I get calls from Championship managers, League One managers, and even a couple of Prem managers asking me to help them. Now, not in a rude way, I won't name names. I've said no to 4 managers in the last 6 months. And the reason I've said no is because, not in a rude way, I can't have my name and my business brand associated with someone that I don't believe in. And when Robbo called me about about supporting him and his backroom staff and the team, it was the biggest no-brainer I've ever had in my life, because I'm really excited about the value that we can add. I'm excited about, you know, all the marginal gains that we talked about, and marginal gains on, off the pitch in every single way, and creating an actual plan. You know, not in a room. I've written this and a lot of them said this in a lot of podcasts. Football is traditionally, you know, only football gives itself a pat on the back for just bringing in directors of football. We should have had that 35 years ago. So we are trying to create a very strategic process about how we add value on the pitch, off the pitch, and how that aligns actually on the grass. So yeah, that's. I mean, Michael knows my background, but I hope the fans know that, you know, I'm very dedicated to this process of helping the manager and the backroom staff and the players, you know, anyone who asks for some help, and really try and support them and grow to be better versions of our current selves.
No, that certainly came through really, really strongly from Michael when he did the Meet the Academy recently. One of the things I was interested in is the philosophy, some of the rules that the Academy have, such as the Black Boot rule. And I asked him about how that came about. And he basically said it was a conversation between yourself, Mark, and him as to, and like talked about a lot of philosophy about not having too much like stuff that can get distracted, you know, straps and things and gloves. I found that super interesting, that kind of philosophy, and I wonder whether is that something you want to carry through to the first team?
Well, I'll answer it, and then probably Rob will go on to it, because Rob makes those decisions. I think if we look into child psychology and too much too soon, and I write about this in my book, like the world's gone mad. We're giving teenagers, you know, way too much too soon, and then they don't really know what hard work looks like. And it's not easy to be a professional football player, and it's not easy to play well every week. And the analogy that I give is that the average person can go to work and be a 5 out of 10 and just get through a day and not really feel it, but a pro footballer can't do that. And I was just thinking, you know, football's famous for irrational thinking, isn't it? And that's not about Wimbledon fans. It's every fan in the world is so emotional about their team. They love their team so much, but they don't actually think rationally about how difficult it is. And you don't meet, as Robbo says, you don't meet a player. I've never met a player that doesn't want to do well, ever. But I just think sometimes players don't know how to do well. And it's our job, you know, for people that are on the call that know about servant leadership, it's our job to serve the players, not the other way around. And if we give the players the tools to be able to implement the game plan, which is our job, which is what we get paid for, then we'll have a better chance of being successful.
And is there, so a few people have asked for, and Steph King is interested in about your conversation around positive culture in the workplace, and is asking for book recommendations. Is there any kind of thing that you use? Is there a philosophy you follow, or is it all
hundreds, thousands? Yeah, legacy book, absolute no-brainer. I'm reading a book at the moment called Quiet Leadership. So different types of leaders. Yeah, I'm just looking at my bookshelf there. My book, if he wants to buy my book, Educating Football, that'll be quite a pragmatic book. Yeah, just anything really. But a lot of my pedagogical stuff is, you know, a lot of my leadership stuff is based around Lencioni model, which is trust, accountability, vulnerability. And Robbo will know this. I did a session on the players on the importance of being vulnerable. So I've said to the backroom staff, it's important that we model vulnerability, because we're trying to create a culture of genuine, authentic openness. And, you know, if we think, forget football here, if we think all of the people on this call when they go to work, are they their true, authentic selves? And I said to Robbo over a coffee probably 2 months ago, I said, if I ever work with you and I cannot be my true, authentic self and you cannot be that, I said, I'm not the man for you. So, you know, that's where I think it's so important to take your armor off. You know, we're all wearing armor at home and at work. Take it off and just really try and grow. The problem, Hannah, final thing I say is, if you show vulnerability to the wrong person, you know, in any workplace, again, particularly in a football change room, it's pretty full on in a pro football change room. However, that doesn't mean that it still can't happen. And my job and everyone else's job in the backroom staff and the players' job is to make sure we have high trust. And as you know, that takes time.
Yeah. And I mean, Paul Raymond has also asked, basically, you want to know a bit more about how you work with players and whether it is a mixture of kind of one-on-one group sessions. What does it look like in practice?
Depends what the manager wants. So if the manager asks me to do X, I'll do X, and if they ask me to do Y, but I do have a say, to be fair. I mean, this week, I've just made phone calls. I've just literally just been on the phone all week speaking to players about life and how they feel and staying on the bus. So like, you know, I call Robbo the people carrier. He's driving the bus, but we've all got to be on the bus going in the same direction, in the same route. So we're just making sure we're aligned. Yeah, language that I like to use is alignment, making sure that we're aligned and what we say and what the players hear is actually exactly the same messages, and making sure the frequency is clean and clear. And also just, you know, even on match days at home, just listening to the team talks and making sure, like you say, what are we aligned with the messages that we're giving? And I think my education background has enabled us to support that.
I mean, you talked about being your authentic self, and I think it's a question for both of you, really, from Dominic Francis. It's about kind of how you look after yourself. He references Neil Ardley being clearly burnt out with all the responsibility that came being manager. And basically, how do you kind of cope? And he's asked whether you're too sort of he doesn't want you to leave, basically. And so, how are you gonna keep up with the stress of being a manager?
Well, firstly, I think, you know, there might be people on this listening and are all different ages thinking, what are they going on about cultures and stuff like that? But I think a lot of the frustrations of managers come from the lack of understanding that people have changed. So football hasn't changed, you know, formations haven't changed. All that's the same, you know. It makes me laugh when I watch the telly now and people talk about, oh, we're playing a false nine and this, you know, this stuff was going on in 1938, you know. So football hasn't changed. What has changed is how people, you know, get those characteristics, the stuff that you see lots of managers moan about. Oh, they don't communicate anymore. They don't care like they used to. They don't run as hard as they used. All these things, it's all nonsense. They do. They just learn in different ways. So, you know, if you go back to when I was younger, and probably a lot of managers, you know, a lot of your character was built from the way you were brought up. Where, you know, if you lived on a council estate and you played in cages and you had a Saturday job and you had a paper round and you had all those things, all these things build character. But those things don't happen now. You know, those kind of things don't happen. Everything is very easily accessible. You know, most things you want, you can get very, very quickly and very, very easily. The one thing you can't get very quickly and very easily is a football career. It's the toughest thing, one of the toughest things you'll ever do. But it doesn't make these people bad people. They're just products of what modern life is. It doesn't mean they can't work incredibly hard. It doesn't mean they don't care passionately about the football club they play for. Am I making sense? So it's just a different way. So what I see is managers get so frustrated why people don't behave like they used to be brought up, rather than thinking the world's changed. And this is what Steve and I are talking about and all this stuff. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're just saying the world has changed. People learn differently. And to see those Wimbledon performances that I believe Wimbledon fans want to see just looks very different to probably what it looked 25, 30 years ago, because people are just different, you know. So, you know, I've got the lads are reading a book called Relentless at the moment, which basically the reason I like the book is it puts people into three categories in terms of how they look at challenges. You know, give an example, it calls them callers, closers and cleaners, and a caller will come in to work and do enough. A closer will come in and do more if you ask him. A cleaner comes in and raises the bar so high that you have to keep in line with them. So all through the book, it gives you different examples of how, and it just helps players reflect, because, you know, a lot of young players, they've got this ability, and it's like standing at the bottom of a mountain, and being a professional footballer is at the top of the mountain, but they don't know how to climb the mountain. And that's our job, is to help them, because they want to climb the mountain, they just don't know how. So all this stuff is just what we're talking about, and it comes from, you know, in a real macho industry, where now people perhaps they haven't got that character resilience to thrive like they used to. It's just going, look, it's nonsense, you know, and it's just a different way. But I say it's a different way, but if you listen to back, it went on before. I was watching Terry Venables and Malcolm Allison do an interview back in 1980 something, and they were talking about behaviours and learning environments. So it's all gone. It's gone on before. It's just a different way of bringing it out, really. You know.
I I mean, you talk about
So
kind
me,
of
you
the
was
world has
asking about
changed.
me when you. So sorry.
Oh
Back
yeah,
your
how do
question.
you?
So how do I not come burnt out? By not getting frustrated by it, by
Mm.
believing in processes, by believing in the staff around me, and for me, it's giving player ownership. You know, I want to empower the players to perform. So I want to bring about methods that gives them intrinsic motivation, and so I'm a big believer. That's why I'm such a big believer in values, because if you have such strong values, if you have a purpose behind why you come to work every day, that becomes an intrinsic motivation. And once you've got players who are intrinsically motivated, you haven't got to think about the extremes and stuff, which I think is absolute nonsense. Like, if you win Saturday, I'll give you a day off and stuff like that. It's like, well, I don't want a day off. I want to come back into work because I love being here. So it's just putting a purpose behind everything. But obviously, this doesn't happen overnight. This takes time, you know. So my way of dealing with it is just, you know, I love what I do, Hannah. I'm not going to get burnt out. I love what I do, so I'm all right.
It totally comes through. I mean, you're talking about kind of the world's changed, but also football kind of hasn't and has. I am interested in your, and also it's a question as well from Arash, on your thoughts on data and advanced metrics such as XG. Where do you fall on that?
In terms of data, what is he talking about? Player recruitment stuff now, or?
So he says expected goals has been talked about a lot again in the media, with Brighton's underlying numbers being very good, but they're not quite finding the net. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I must admit it's not a massive strength of mine. I know in terms of recruitment, you know, we're certainly going to be looking at data. In terms of expected goals, I must admit it's not something I look at. I'm just a big believer. There's always reasons. You know, I've seen data before when they've said teams look like they're performing well, but they're actually not. Based on the data, it tells you that they're probably overachieving and it's not going to last. So I understand that kind of thing. So it's not something I've looked at massively, but you know, I'm sure it has a purpose. I'm a big believer in reflection and not being blinded by things. So you know, that's why we have not an ifs, buts and maybes, you know. So we don't rely on referees' decisions. We don't rely on, oh, if it hadn't have hit the bar, it blah blah blah. There's a reason behind everything. It's either technical deficiencies or tactical deficiencies. So again, it goes back to processes. But you know, so in terms of data, it's not a strength of mine. You know, I must admit.
I don't mind my data actually, Hannah. From an education background where we're awash with it, but I do think football clubs are becoming data rich and system poor. Not that different to educational establishments. We've got all this data, but what do we actually do with it? So when Chris McConnell, the strength and conditioning, sends through the data for the team, the first thing I go to is distance covered, just because I just want to see how much the lads have run around. And I'll ask him questions. I've asked him questions in the last 14 days about how certain players compare in distances to his time at Millwall when he was there. So I just want to know what the champ lads run and how distance they run. So I will use those to maybe provide more questions rather than answers. I think people were obsessed with data that it gives you answers, but data should give you questions as well as answers. So it's in summary, using the data to inform learning rather than always measure it.
Totally. I think we're basically near time, and there's been loads of questions. So I'm hoping that you'll both be willing to come back very soon to answer more, because I think people are definitely keen to ask you more, but I don't think we're going to get through them all here. But maybe if I just kind of end on thinking about, there's been quite a few questions around recruitment and whether you're hoping to appoint a director of football to help with that, and what's your kind of how are you going to go about recruiting players over the summer? Will you be talking to agents? Who's responsible? So maybe if we could just like close with the thought about recruitment and kind of next steps in the summer.
Yeah. So the way I see recruitment, well, the way the club sees it is they don't want to take that away from me as in the decision process, but I don't want to be bogged down with talking to agents. I mean, to be honest, that's been the biggest nuisance since I've had the job, is just people contact, not in terms of the people a nuisance, but just people coming to you, and again, it takes your focus away from what you want to be doing, which is working with the players. So in terms of recruitment, the way we see it is my role is to identify what we need in what areas, so one, you look at our style of play. So that's something I just think I should touch on in terms of how the club's going to grow, because people have said to me, oh, why do you want to play? Why are we playing more possession based? And I think for the club to grow, we need to play a more possession based style of football. I'm not talking about tippy tappy football. It needs to be something Wimbledon players can identify with. But if we're going to recruit, if we're going to keep our best young academy players, we have to realise they want to play a progressive style of exciting possession-based football. That's just fact of life. They don't want to play long ball football. If we want to get the best loanees in from the best clubs, then again, they're not going to loan your players unless you play a certain style of football. That's not me being rude. That's just a fact. If they're not going to give you their best midfielder unless you're playing a certain style of football. So one, it's about our style, what that looks like. So, high tempo, effective football is what we want to play. And that doesn't mean 10 passes. That can be one pass. Possession football is about you passing to a teammate. It can be one pass over the top. It can be 5 passes. And then within that, you look at the intensity we want to play at, how we want to be off the ball. So it's then me identifying what areas that we think we need strengthening. I will then give that to Joe and the people he's working with, and they will then come up with players, and then we will look at figures. So, for example, like going back to what Steve said, I might say, well, there's no point giving me a midfield player unless he can run 12K. I'm not saying I will say that, but that could be, for example, there's no point. And then they will come back with players who you will look at, who fit the mould for the way that we want to play. And then once you get down to a short list, it will then go for me. Then you start going to the character profiling, and you start looking, are they the people that you want to bring into the building? Are they going to fit with our culture and our values? And there's a lot of talk about, they get the club, or they get us. It's the common thing with Wimbledon, they get us. But we need players that genuinely get us, because get us isn't doing a video interview saying, oh yeah, I love Wimbledon. It's how you behave on a day-to-day basis on and off the pitch. So that's how the recruitment will look. It's me identifying it, what we need, then them coming up with players who we feel are going to fit, and then making the final decision on those players. But where we are as a club, Hannah, we can't afford to make too many mistakes. And I think since we've been a league club, we've signed over 200 players. So again, we're talking about building things. If you're changing 70% of your staff every year, I don't think you're in a position of building something. So we've got to have less mistakes in recruitment and get it right.
Do you have any indication as to how many of those players out there that, you talk about players that get us? Do you have any idea as to how many whether there are those?
Again, I think it comes from, I'll give you an example. We talk about the academy players and we go, oh, they get us. And I'll be honest, we've had players in the academy that have been here a year, and some that have been here 5 years, but some that have been here a year, you can see they get us more than others. And that will sometimes be from their upbringing, their own values, the values put in by their parents. So, we signed a young lad 18 months ago, and at the academy, we have a video that we show them, and we brought his dad in, and the boy started crying, and the dad had tears in his eyes. And then you look deeper into their background, and you see what his dad had gone through, and what he'd gone through to, he come to this country from another country, and he had to graft so hard. So the Wimbledon story just grabbed him by the heart, and the man was there with tears in his eyes, and his son was. So you just look at that person, you go, well, they're going to get us, 100% going to get us. And that young man will play for Wimbledon one day. So, it's digging deep and not being lazy. You're going to have to find out a lot about these people and maybe put them through processes to see, if they genuinely get what this club's about, so, and that won't be a short-term thing. We're going to have to do our due diligence on it. And at least if you get it wrong, well, you've done everything, but we can't afford to get it wrong, in my opinion, because having if you get it slightly wrong on ability, it's one thing. If you've got a player in, you go, oh, I expected a little bit more of him, But if his character's still fantastic and he comes to work every day to want to be the best he can be, well, then you haven't gone that far wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I said that I would close, but I think there's still like a little bit of appetite just to keep going. If you're happy to keep going for a little bit longer.
I'm okay.
Okay, cool. Just because there's been some really good questions coming in as well, such as which is from Chris Stevens, which is easier to change, talent or mindset?
Cool, what a question. Well, I would choose that one. Go on.
As I said, I think talent is my mindset. You know, I think the best, I answered it with Asazi. I think talent to me is the ability to want to improve every single day. That to me is talent. Ability is a different thing, you know, because if you've got certain amount of ability, but if you haven't got the mindset to make the most of that ability, so that's the talent, if that makes sense. Talent. And that's why if you go back to like the All Blacks, I'm not allowed to swear, am I? But one of their sayings was "no dickhead." Sorry if I'm upset, but that was their thing. So they will openly admit that there were far more, I won't say talented, but there was players who had far more ability than certain players that played for the All Blacks. But the talent was more important. The ability of understanding what the shirt meant and giving absolutely everything. So in terms of you can improve someone's ability if they've got the talent to work hard every day. So that's why when I answered about Asazi being our biggest regret letting go, because I knew that lad had the talent to listen and improve every day. So in terms of where he could take his ability, there is no limits. And if you look at someone like Ronaldo, who's obviously got ability, but his biggest talent is that he basically never ever stops wanting to be better, and that's why he stayed ahead of the game. And that is the same in any sport. Roger Federer, these people reinvent themselves because of their biggest talent they've got is the fact that they never ever want to stop learning and being the best they can be.
You could see that. I don't know whether you saw that Netflix documentary, The Last Dance, with Michael Jordan. Basically, you could see that it was his determination. It was just, he was just, that's what drove him, and he didn't stop.
Exactly.
And he was trying to instill that in the rest of the team as well.
Yeah, and obviously they've got natural attributes that you know they've got things that are given, but without the talent, that drive, you know, they might just be good or average. That's what makes them exceptional.
Yeah, I always say, I said this to Robbo on the phone this afternoon. Strength lies in differences, not similarities. But I think I write in my book, actually, talent's the most overused word I've ever heard in my life. So sorry, Robbo, I'm going to disagree with you on that one, which is what he enjoys anyway. He doesn't mind me disagreeing with him. But yeah, I just think talent. If you look at the evidence of talent, and it's important that people know it's just hard work. Like if you look at all the research, you know, child genius. They're a child genius in maths. No, they've just done more hours. They're a child genius at chess. No, they've done more hours. They're a child genius at football. No, they've just had more practice. And I think the key to our element now as coaching staff and backroom team is to make sure that our coaching is absolutely on the money. You know, it's like a great teacher at school, isn't it? Robert knows this. I never call coaching, I always call it teaching. Like great teachers add value quicker than a rubbish teacher. So our job is to make sure that we teach better than anyone they've ever had in terms of these players. So yeah, teaching adds to talent. But I don't think you wake up in the morning and go, all right, I'm going to do 25 keepy-ups today. You just got to do it a lot and fail at it a lot. So yeah, it's a great question though. Whoever asked that, they need a big pat on the back. That's a good pub question, that.
There was something that Michael said in the Meet the Academy around the philosophy of winners do more, which I found really stuck with me actually. Of, you know, when typically exercise would be a punishment, but actually flipping that on its head, and the winning team in a training game doing the running, and actually that kind of psychological transformation of, you know, punishment, physical punishment, you've just kind of overridden that which I thought was quite interesting.
When you think about it, Hannah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's so much of football is back to front. So we have sports scientists recording how far people run because it's really important to run. Yet we punish people by telling them that running's a bad thing. So if you do something wrong, we make you run. So it's all back to front. You know, we get so much back to front. So all we did as an academy was go, well, running is a massive part of football. Without it, you're not going to be a success. So why would you look at it as a punishment? You look at it as a reward. So we just rewarded winning with running, you know. So yeah.
And he was basically saying that the losing team would hate it, like hate not running.
Yeah. No, I had it when I did the youth team. I had it. We drew against the team, and the lads were lined up on the side of the pitch, ready to run after the game. And I said, "What are you doing?" They went, "We're running." I went, "No, we didn't win." And they were upset because they weren't running after. Yeah.
Do you think that's happened? That you're kind of, are you trying to put that into the first team now? That mentality?
Yeah, I mean, we are, and that's part of having, you know, things like the values boards down at training. So again, it takes time. My biggest frustration, I try not to get frustrated, but I love coaching. So my biggest frustration over these last 5 weeks is the limited amount of coaching time, because that's where I love being on the grass, coaching players, teaching players. And it's been trying to think outside the box how we can bring this stuff to life in the limited time that we've had. But, you know, where I like it to go, and I've talked to the players about this, is that they take ownership of the sessions in terms of the intensity, the communication. Because that's the game. So I feel the coaches should be there just to add the fine detail. So, you know, again, it comes from that, where they raise the standards. You know, we've got 3 rules that once we get onto the training pitch more, that will bring out, where basically they control the intensity, the communication of the session. So if it drops, I'm looking for them to lift it. You know, I shouldn't have to be in control of these things. They should be in control of it. Myself and all the other coaches, we should be there to add the detail, you know, some tactical messages, or get them thinking about different things, because that's what happens on a Saturday. You know, they've got to drive it themselves. And I even said that to them on Saturday. I said, you know, I had to drive certain areas of the game too much from the sideline. You have to drive it yourselves. So again, it's a process, Hannah. These things take time. They take time. But the great thing is, once you've got it there, and once it happens, it's intrinsic. It's not extrinsic. So you're not. That's why I say you're not rewarding them for performance. So you're not saying, boys, if you play well Saturday, we're going off to Marbella for a week. It's intrinsically there because it's all based around values and culture and environments. If that makes sense.
Yeah, total sense. I think we're so lucky to have you both, and I'm so excited for what you bring. And I think I kind of left the academy session with Michael just thinking exactly the same. Like, I completely love your philosophies, and yeah, really excited for what's to come with you both. I think we'll probably wrap it up there, if that's all right, but hopefully you can come back again soon and answer all the questions. Everybody's loving the chat, and I think the 9 Years podcast are now going to follow up with they're heading, so you can head over to 9 Years and listen to a kind of roundup of this discussion. And this is going to be recorded, so and should be available within the next couple of days, probably tomorrow. So just wanted to round up to say thank you so much, both Mark and Steve, for joining. And Ivor, did you want to say any closing remarks?
No, brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Yep, as always, well done, Robbo and Steve, and good luck for Tuesday. Massive night for us.
Yeah, thanks, Ivor.
Okay.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.